All right, guys, welcome, official welcome to today's webinar, Understanding the Cortana Intelligence Suite, which is actually presented by John Zaberla, and we do have our BI Analytics guest, Jamal Syed. My name is Elizabeth Feldman, and I'd like to thank you guys for joining us today. We will be kicking off the webinar in just a few minutes, but before we get started, I just wanted to review a few housekeeping items just to let you all know how you can participate in today's session. So although all of you are muted, you do have the ability to ask questions throughout the webinar just using that chat and question window pane. It's located near the bottom of the GoToWebinar control panel. At the end of our presentation, we will address all your questions, taking as many as we have time for. However, if we are unable to get to any of your questions, we'll be sure to have someone from our team follow up with you. I'm pleased to introduce today's guest speaker, Jamal Syed. Jamal has over 20 years of experience in the BI industry, and he keeps quite a keen eye on the emerging technologies in this area. He's definitely a thought leader in the analytics space, and in fact, he speaks frequently at various conferences around the country. At Emtec, Jamal heads up our Global Analytics Group. Our today's main presenter and speaker is our National Practice Director, John Zaberla. John has over 23 years of experience in the professional services area. He focuses primarily around accounting, IT, and project management. John here at Emtec leads our Microsoft practice initiatives. So once again, guys, thank you, and ladies, thank you for joining our webinar. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to you, John.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Today, we're going to take you through the agenda as you see here. We'll first give you the obligatory overview about Emtec, and won't spend a lot of time on that. Then we'll jump into the Cortana Intelligence Suite, give you a brief demo on Power BI, and then we're going to talk a bit about some of the challenges we see today in the analytics marketplace. And then also relate that to, well, then why look at Microsoft and the Cortana Intelligence Suite to address some of those challenges. And then we'll wrap up with next steps and some Q&A. So Emtec, we've been around for over 20 years. Organization that spreads the globe with offices throughout Canada, North America, and India. We're north of 600 dedicated associates. We've been nominated a Best Place to Work by the Chicago Tribune a few times. And we have a host of different practice areas, as you can see along the left panel. We'll talk a bit about those momentarily. And then our services range from advisory, applications, cloud, analytics, infrastructure, and we'll talk just a bit about that in a moment as well. Our advisory, implementation, and support services span various practice areas, so a group that will help from some advisory services such as performance governance, organizational change management. As of late, we've been really seeing a lot of traction in our mobility practice, an area that everyone obviously has been hearing a lot about with cloud and mobility. We have a large-scale infrastructure group that works throughout largely North America. And then we have an analytics practice, of which Jamal is here to join us, and pleased to have him on the call today. And then an application group that largely deals with a lot of different enterprise application implementations. And some of those practice areas spanning by technology are Microsoft, Oracle, Salesforce, and a few of the others here listed. Specific to Microsoft, we focus a lot on the Cortana Intelligence Suite, SharePoint, the Dynamics family of enterprise applications, and then a lot of the different supporting technologies within the Microsoft stack. So enough about Emtec, and let's jump into talking a bit about the Cortana Intelligence Suite. So the tagline that really summarizes the Cortana Intelligence Suite would be, it's a fully managed big data advanced analytics suite to transform your data into intelligent action. So really, what does that mean? Well, over the years, Microsoft first dipped its toe into the waters of BI and analytics with SharePoint, Performance Point, various SQL Server technologies going back 10, 15 years. Been evolving that through Excel, Power Pivot, Power View, and Power BI as of late. And then within the last year, they've really begun to bundle a lot of those into cloud services and expanding their footprint within the overall analytics and BI space. So a lot of what you see on the screen here is what we'll delve into today. And that comprises what their newly branded Cortana Intelligence Suite will bring to the table. So really what it will do for you as you start to look at it. It's really a revolutionary, and it's a new cloud-based solution. And all of these solutions are fully managed up in the cloud, so no hardware. A really good advantage of the Microsoft Cortana Intelligence Suite. So what it will also really bring to the table is it's the power of the data. And this is something that in this solution, Microsoft believes that everyone, as well as us, should have that access to that data. So it really removes all the sophistication and the complexity of today's data and deploying analytics so that you're able to take that intelligent action and then walk away with better and more informed decisions. Now let's take a look a bit more about it. So first we'll talk about why Cortana. And we were just debating before we got on the call, is it Cortana, Cortana? Well, Cortana, as some of you may know, is actually the equivalent to Apple's Siri or Google's Google Now. It first surfaced in Microsoft's top-selling video game, the Halo franchise. And Cortana was supposed to come around in the 26th century as artificial intelligence in that game. So Microsoft is bringing that up in today's world and making that more of a business application. So here you can see the parallel between what consumers can experience on a Microsoft device in terms of locating answers, predictions, monitoring, and task completion, and where this will start to move as you experience and deploy the Cortana Intelligence Suite within a business use case. So this graphic is a really good way to parallel the two, and this is where we start to really get the most excitement out of working with the solution. What it will mean to you will be less wasted time in terms of compiling data and making your intelligent decisions. You'll have improved dashboards, metrics, future predictions and forecasts, no longer just relying upon rear view facing reports, and quicker, more timely access to that information. So all of this will allow you to make some smarter decisions, and this is really an area that we get more excited about as well, is ultimately that'll help us have some more free time to take your clients golfing, take your business associates out to dinner, because you'll have that quicker, more enabled reaction by working with the Cortana Intelligence Suite. And really with the digital assistant itself, which the name itself is what most people are familiar with today, will allow you to ask questions in a natural language, render results, predict events, and monitor and do some of those things as well. So now moving into the full suite of capabilities and products. If you look really bottom up, you have tools from information management that we'll cover, big data stores, machine learning, dashboards with Power BI, some artificial intelligence, and then pre-configured business solutions upon the stack of solutions. So really a quick overview from the ones bottom up here. The data factory, that service is going to provide the extract, transform, and load, your ETL hooks from on-premise and cloud sources, such as a data lake or SQL data warehouses. The data catalog will allow you to discover and register your data sources. The event hubs, this service will meet the challenge of connecting disparate data sources while handling the scale of the aggregate stream. So this lets you provision capacity to process events from millions of devices while preserving your event order. The Azure Data Lake Store is where Microsoft is getting into big data, and this is another fully managed service in the cloud. You won't need to stand up your own Hadoop clusters, and it gives you a simple service to get your data into that data lake when you need it, and then you can get your data out at a very high throughput. Then you have your SQL data warehouse, and this is a one-of-a-kind, and really something that Microsoft is proud about. It's an elastic data warehouse, so you're able to scale this as you need it upon demand, and it will run with full T-SQL. The machine learning service will allow you to create different experiments and algorithms, and we'll talk a bit about that more in the upcoming slides. HD Insight will allow you to deploy and provision Apache Hadoop clusters in the cloud. And then the Azure Stream Analytics, a service for complex event processing. This will allow you to analyze the streaming data without having to code Java, and allows you to put simple SQL into your data streams and more simply do your analytics and dashboards. We talked a bit about the Cortana Personal Digital Assistant. Then the bot framework and the cognitive services is really where you get your artificial intelligence and predictive analysis layer. And we'll talk a bit about how you can build some of those and get that working. So now moving deeper into each of the components. So this illustration really shows the way of, at the top here from the data factory, of collecting data from different on-premise data sources, how this tool will allow you to ingest it, prepare it, organize, and analyze it. You can do a range of transformations and then publish the ready-to-use data for consumption by a tool such as a Power BI. So this, as I mentioned earlier, is a cloud-based data integration service, and this will allow you to orchestrate different services, collect all the raw data, and then transform it and bring it in to ready-to-use information. So some may parallel this to the SQL Server integration services that people are familiar with. It's not the same, but conceptually, it brings that level of integration to the cloud. The next component we'll talk about is the data catalog. So this is another fully managed cloud service that will allow you to register and discover your enterprise data sources. So this provides capabilities that any user, analysts, data scientists, developers can really use to discover, understand, and consume all these different data sources in the cloud. And the reason for this is it really starts to look at the problem that you see a lot of times users are not aware of the different data sources that exist. They don't necessarily know the location. Only certain people do. And then sometimes when they do know that location, it's difficult to document. So this is a way to more automatically compile, discover, and catalog that data. The event hubs. So these are a highly scalable service that will ingest millions of events per second. This way you can then process and analyze massive amounts of data by all your connected devices and applications. So this really acts as the front door for an event pipeline. And once that data is collected into a data hub, it can be transformed, stored, and then you can access it with any of the real-time analytics that are available. Moving forward now into the data lake stores. So here's where Microsoft has really dipped its toe into the whole Hadoop ecosystem. And the Azure Data Lake Store, it's an enterprise-wide hyperscale repository for big data analytic workloads. It allows you to capture data of any size and type and ingest it into one place for operational and analytic needs. So this is something that can be accessed from Hadoop with the Microsoft HD Insight capabilities. And it's built specific for the Apache Hadoop file system. And it's something that the existing HD Insight applications and services that use the web HDFS API can also integrate with the Data Lake Store. So this is something that next we're going to talk a bit about the SQL Data Warehouse. And before I get too far into that, just to draw the line for some of those that may not be as familiar with some of the nomenclature, an individual by the name of James Dixon, who was the founder and CTO of Pentaho, had been credited with the term data lake. And his description in comparing that to a data warehouse is, think of a data warehouse or a data mart as a store of bottled water. It's cleansed, packaged, and structured for easy consumption, whereas that data lake is a large body of water in a more natural state. And the contents of the data lake stream is a form of a source to fill the lake, and various users of that lake can then examine, dive in, and take samples. So really, what does that mean when you compare the two? Well, a data warehouse, you keep structured data for processing, and when you have a data lake, it's structured, unstructured, or raw. So think any source of data, media. You can see some of the samples here on the image. For processing, the data warehouse is really schema based upon the write access, whereas the data lake is built upon your read access. And the storage for data lake is designed for low-cost storage, whereas your warehouse is more built for larger volumes, and it gets to be more expensive. And the agility from a data lake, much more agile to config and reconfig as needed, versus that data warehouse that's more fixed and less agile. The security model, of course, for data warehouses having been around a lot longer are more mature, but the data lake itself is becoming more mature as time progresses. So that is a quick summary, if you will, and the differences between the two. So moving more into the Microsoft SQL Data Warehouse, as I mentioned earlier, it's a cloud-based and it's elastic data warehouse. It's a one-of-a-kind, and Microsoft being very proud of its capabilities, you're able to scale that out to process massive amounts of data, relational, non-relational, and build that out to handle your data warehousing needs. The other components we'll talk about are the Azure machine learning capabilities. So if the image depicts here, you're able to access different sources of data, bring that into a machine learning studio, and develop different algorithms and techniques to access that data, and then surface that back out via web service to end users. So think a lot about, from a consumer perspective, when individuals are out shopping on various websites, how they start to learn and react to your shopping behaviors, and then provide suggestions and other items that you should be looking to consider. So that, as you can start to take that and build that within the Cortana Intelligence Suite, you can extend that into different business use cases as well. Another component would then be part of that Hadoop ecosystem, and Microsoft's component is your HD Insight. So this provides a cloud implementation of Microsoft Azure, and it integrates within the rapidly expanding Apache Hadoop technology stack. And I'm not going to read off all the different components within the Hadoop ecosystem, but it will integrate with a good number of them. And that also will integrate with a lot of the Microsoft BI tools, such as your Power BI, Excel, SQL analysis services, and SQL reporting services. Moving through the different Cortana Intelligence Suite components, we come across then Power BI, one that I think most individuals out there have become more familiar with. It's really being marketed and into a lot of organizations, much the way Office originally was marketed and sold into a lot of organizations. So it's really becoming the Office, if you will, of the new millennium. It's a product that a lot of end users are at least touching and starting to work with. It's Microsoft's complete dashboarding, reporting, and visualization tool. And it really does create a lot of rich, appealing dashboards that you're able to create, share within your organization. And it's really easy to get data to. There's a lot of different end services you can access on premises as well as data files. And we're going to stop, take a quick look at some of those capabilities, and show you how you can do that. So in this Power BI instance, right now I'm looking at what would be largely what a lot of people would start with, would be a core landing dashboard. So in my workspace here, I have a lot of different tiles, ones that I feel were pertinent to running the sales operations within my business. And before I get into working through the dashboards and how that was pulled together, I'm going to show you some of the different ways you can access data. So from within Power BI, you can access different contact packs, as they're called. And a lot of those are SaaS application services that Microsoft has been working with various vendors to create those access points. So I'm not going to read through all of them, but you can scan through and see some samples of various applications that are out there, various marketing, obviously some Microsoft Dynamics solutions are accessible, Salesforce, and some other tools and applications as well. And these are expanding every month. New ones are being published and being accessible. Some other data ways that you can, or other ways you can access your data, would be by accessing your files. And you can get these via local file, OneDrive, SharePoint. All of those files that you can be accessing typically need to be something with Excel, CSV, SQL Server analysis services. There's ways to tap into those different end files and bring that data into your Power BI experience. Then databases, misspoke. Actually, here's where you would access your SQL Server analysis services, but then also get into your cloud-based Azure SQL databases and warehouses and tap into your data lakes as well. So now we'll go back to the Power BI workspace. and look at a couple of these tiles and see what you can do within the Power BI application. So every one of these tiles relates back to reports and data sets. So those are your main building blocks within Power BI. And in this example, I want to drill a little bit further into deal size and the deal age trend. So by clicking on that, it will take me into the sales performance report, which has several different sections. And you'll see that this report itself can be very interactive in nature. Or if I'm looking, for example, at the average deal size and time to close, if I click on or hover over the month of December, I'm able to see some of the details behind that number, such as the exact average deal size down to the penny. By clicking on that component within that specific report here, it will dynamically change other areas within that report. So depending on the month, as I click on it over here, I'm now seeing the estimated versus actual trend specific to the month of April. Clicking on December, it goes back to just showing me information for December. So that's the dynamic and the interactive nature that you can bring by working with the various dashboards. Going back to the main dashboard, I noticed that one of the tiles here isn't all that informative, this revenue by country and region. Looking at it seems just to be a map. So by clicking on that, I want to go in and take a look a little further, understand what's going on with this report. Again, it doesn't look to be all that informative, so I'm going to take a look at what data elements it's trying to read. And as I'm looking at it right now, it looks like it's trying to just give me the location of country. It doesn't seem to be very meaningful. I'm going to look to change that to city. And through some clicks, drags, and drops, I'm now able to see some more meaningful highlights of where our customer base is located. I now can see that in the California, Texas, and Washington state area, we do have some critical mass. And by going back, I've now produced a more meaningful dashboard that I can then bring back to my tile. So if I click back on the dashboard, it's going to ask me if I'd like to save those changes. It will save them. Eventually it will save them, and then it will bring the tile back here once I refresh. Well, at least not right now. It should be refreshing it back right here, but I think the point and the ease of making the updates to that map is what I was looking to highlight there. So those are just some of the areas you can go into and look within Power BI. There is a lot more you can do with it. There's also the Cortana Personal Digital Assistant, which is another way by going in and speaking and asking some questions in natural language. And from there, it can render some various reports and dashboards. Do not have that today. We will be showing that in a future webinar. But in an example of typing in that same natural language, if I'm on my dashboard tiles and I'd like to inquire a bit more about trade shows, by just typing in some questions or information, it quickly gave me a list of the different leads that have come from trade shows. I'm now able to see the names of those customers, and if that was some information I needed to readily access, just by keying in that question or the information, I'm able to get that right on my dashboard. So that will conclude the demo portion of Power BI. I'm going to go back to our presentation. Then there's a few other elements within the Cortana Intelligence Suite that I'd like to highlight, and then we'll turn this over to Jamal, and he can tell us a bit more about what he's seeing in the analytics marketplace. So the BOT framework and the cognitive services. So the BOT framework is something that you really use to build and connect intelligent bots that will naturally interact with you when your users are communicating with text and other communication, such as Skype, SMS, Telegram, etc. So that's something you can start to build, and then similar to that Cortana Personal Digital Assistant, where you can put in natural language queries and have it report back analytics and data to you. You can use your own bots to create some of the similar type of connections into your own end application. So it's a way to extend with your developers and access your data in that manner. Also, the cognitive services, which used to be Project Oxford for those that keep score at home for all the different Microsoft technologies. It's a set of APIs and software development kits and services that developers can also use to make their applications more intelligent and engaging. So think of vision, speech, natural language, knowledge, even emotions are areas where you can start to build some of your own applications that will naturally integrate and add some intelligent features into your end solution that can tap into the underlying Cortana Intelligence Suite. So from there, we're going to talk a bit now about the challenges in today's marketplace that we're seeing with analytics. I'm going to turn it over to Jamal. Jamal?
Thank you, John. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you, John. I think that was a great presentation, and I just want to add a few things. I don't have much to say, but what I've seen so far from your presentation, I strongly believe that it was long due from Microsoft, because Microsoft has this whole history of being very connected to the users, and I believe what they have done with their BI and analytics, it is taking a huge step towards the users. Because what we are seeing is that traditional analytics has been changing quite drastically in the past so many years. There are four main drivers for innovations, what we have seen: users, data, economy, and the technology. Users are changing. Users are getting more savvy now. They would like to touch and feel the data themselves. There used to be that old scenario where there was a group of users, a group of people who are collecting the data and combining the data together and putting reports out. And then there's a group of users, a group of people who are just the data consumers. And we would call them data producers and data consumers. That has changed quite a bit now. That whole middle layer is gone now. That the users are directly connecting to the data sources. And you talked about data lake, and the terms are data marshes now, and there are a whole kind of data that is just available to users to access. Now, data is changing also. It's not just structured data anymore. It was about 80% of the data that we produced before. That was what we call the white noise. We never touched that data. Only 20% of the data that was produced was analyzed at any given time. And that data was put into the data warehouse. And what went into the data warehouse is something that we already know about. So you need to know what value that data brings to you before you store that into the data warehouse, right? Otherwise, you would not capture this data. And that was a big problem. We were only playing with the data that we already knew was valuable. But we were not touching the data which was not valuable, or we thought was not valuable. We're not touching the data to explore further to find out if there's any value to this data. And that has changed now with all this advanced analytics and analytics by the users. That has all changed now completely, because people would like to touch and feel the raw data and try to figure out if that adds any value or not. And of course, now that the technology has changed and it's much more powerful, learning curve has totally diminished now. It used to be that you need to be a report writer, a programmer to go through the data, and you need to understand data very well, that all the nuances of how data is stored in the system. You would know the data warehousing. You would know how the data is combined together. You would know how to join the data. Probably would know how to write a SQL in order to get to this data. That has changed now completely. Now, all these tools are so user-friendly, and they have taken away all of these nuances of the data behind the scene. They present the data to the users in a very business-friendly way. So if you ask a business question, you get a business answer. You do not need to translate that business questions into the technical specs before you get the answer. And that is the analytics agility all about. And we'll talk a little bit. I'll talk about that in the next slide. But of course, the other piece is that it's getting cheaper. It is your hardware is getting cheaper, access to the data is cheaper, you can store a lot more data. Well, we are storing tons and tons more data than what we were storing before, and it makes a lot more sense to explore data. Now, there's a huge difference between exploring the data and mining the data. Now, exploring the data is something that you look at the data and you don't know what this data about and if it has any value or not. Let's play with that. What you show with Power BI, that is very useful, and I'll let you tie all of this together in the end. But that is the most useful thing, that you don't know anything about the data, but you can go and play with this data, explore this data. And you can do that now because of the hardware is cheaper. You do not need to go and build a huge system out there with tons and tons of space in order to do all of this, or buy a huge hardware. You can lease all of this. The cloud has changed the whole momentum. It's a game changer. Cloud and big data, in my opinion, are two things, and the easy visualizations of the data. These are the game changers for in 2000s and onwards, and they have made things a lot simpler for end users. John, if you can go to the next slide. So what is end user? End user is not just data consumer, as we talked about. End user is technically savvy, and end user can get to their data on their own. Self-enablement is very, very important for end user. Analytical agility is as important as a single version of truth. What does that mean? It means that before, IT wanted to have a full control on the data so that nobody has a rogue query on the system. When you ask a question, everybody gets the same answer, so that you do not have a multiple version of truth. What does that mean? It means that I need to connect all of my data silos together, maybe create an enterprise data warehouse, put one tool for everyone to go and get connected to and get the same answer when they ask a question. It is very important. The single version of truth is very important, but also analytical agility, meaning if there's a data available to me as an end user, I would like to connect to it for my personal analysis right away. I would like to explore this data. I would like to make sense of this data. And yes, if it qualifies for my repeatable analytics, I would like to put that into the data warehouse. I would like to put that into the mainstream. So that is this is what analytical agility is, and this is where Gartner 2 years ago came with this bimodal analytics model, where the mode 1 is about the data that you already know. You know exactly what you need to do, and mode 2 is explore, find out what else you can do, and this is where you're basically expanding your horizon. You're stretching the envelope. And we all know data has variety, volume, and velocity. But there's another fourth factor also. Data has value, hidden value, that needs to be explored. We've been hearing about bring your own device, meaning mobile, iPad, and all of that. And of course, that is a game changer also. Now you need to make sure that your data is basically transferable to these devices. But there's another factor, which is bring your own data. Now, this is something new that we have seen in the past few years that is very acceptable. It was not acceptable before. You would not be able to, you should not mesh your own data with the enterprise data. That was a big no-no, but that is okay now. We're seeing that people have their own personal spreadsheet for what-if analysis. They would like to mesh that up with the mainstream data, right? And they would like to do their own personal analysis of this data. And then, of course, I talked about cloud, and probably that's a topic in its own for a whole webinar, but cloud is obviously changing things around pretty fast, and people have a lot more access. If you go to the next slide. John, go to the next slide, please. So what is analytical agility? Ad hoc data visualization. We saw some of that, what John showed us. Data integration for personal analysis, bring your own data. Faster access to the variety of data. It's not just the structured data, but any data, and that's what the data lake is all about. Real-time analytics is very important. Now, real-time reporting has been there for a while, right? Transactional reporting. No, we're talking about real-time analysis, real-time analytics, where you can make sense of the data on the spot as the data is being generated. Self-service data preparation in the past few years, we're seeing that is also becoming very popular. You do not need a data model to analyze the data, but you should be able to quickly put together a model on your own, with your own data and with your own tools to be able to make sense of this data. And that requires further explanation. Probably we'll do another session on this self-service data preparation. But these are the changing trends in the market that we're seeing. And I'm really excited to see what Microsoft is offering, because in my opinion, it was a long due. Microsoft is one organization that has always been playing very close to the end users. And people are very, very comfortable with Microsoft. And I'm really excited to see all of these changes that Microsoft is bringing on the table now in the analytics world. In my opinion, in the past 2 years, Microsoft has covered like maybe 20 years. They were falling way behind before. Data visualization tools like Click and Tableau and then Jasper and Burst, and then enterprise tools like Oracle and IBM and Cognos and SAP Business Objects. They're pretty advanced than Microsoft. But now I think Microsoft has become literally on the top of the paradigm for all of this. So I would like John to hear a little bit more about Microsoft, and you saw these challenges, how Microsoft is reacting to this. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Perfect, Jamal. Good segue. So exactly that. So why, right? Why consider Cortana Intelligence Suite? Why Microsoft? So first we're going to start off with Gartner. Everyone refers to the Magic Quadrant, and Jamal was just mentioning how they've really stepped up the last few years, and it's really becoming a game changer. So when I started looking at these and really looking at how to answer that question, one of the things that comes to mind, and I guess I'll date myself a bit, but if you were familiar with the band KISS back in the day, and whether you ever saw them or not, you can YouTube it. They always started their shows with a mantra about themselves, and obviously they were very full of themselves, as we all know, but more of the slogan itself. They'd start off with, you wanted the best, you got the best, the hottest band in the world. And I started thinking about where Microsoft is positioned right now, and to me that same phrase really rings true, right? It's the hottest BI and analytics solution that's out there right now. If you look at the Magic Quadrant, and you look at the one just for BI and analytics on the left, you can see Microsoft, as far as visionary, top of the heap. Same over here on advanced analytics, which gets more into your machine learning, predictive analysis, things along those lines. So either one, they are at the top of everyone that's out there. So to me, it's a no-brainer for people to be considering them learning more about the solution and seeing how it can apply to their own business needs. Specific to the BI and analytics one, not only at the top of the visionary, but if you kind of look at the angle, they're pretty much at the top of the heap here, between the combination of being that leader and visionary. Clearly, there's some more leaders on the other side with the advanced analytics, but point being, it's really the hottest solution that's out there. And for anyone that's looking at some of these advanced needs, depending on what it may be, it could be as simple as just getting Power BI into your organization to unleash, access your data, and get it into some of your end users and power users and management. It could be something more sophisticated about trying to get your data in and leverage things such as data lakes, algorithms, things along those lines. So depending on the need and the size of the enterprise, clearly a solution that people need to start to consider. Then adding to that, so this was on a slide that was in last year's deck from Microsoft, where they had talked about and really introduced the whole platform at that point. Previously it had been branded the Cortana Analytics Suite, changing that as of late, as I mentioned, over to the Cortana Intelligence Suite. But this summarizes as well the key points that really relate to a lot of what Jamal had mentioned that he's been seeing in the marketplace. So it really provides you those tools and the analytics that will allow you to enable those actions. So it helps to do more predictions and future-based reports, if you will. Everyone thinks of reports, and that's really where the genesis of everything BI and analytics originated. But no longer that static, what was the past, and trying to come up with your own predictions, if you will. Okay, well, I'm going to build a forecast, and that forecast is going to be rooted in numbers that I am going to input into some type of solution. Start to use algorithms and machine learning to predict some of that. So perhaps it smacks a bit of Terminator and it's starting to learn on its own, and that's ultimately where a lot of this, in theory, as well as practice, is starting to go. Then the personal digital assistant, so leveraging Cortana, where you're actually able to to speak natural language and other natural interaction to obtain and achieve some of those analytics and results without having to always build a report and key things in and get somebody more on the developer side to build that out. So think Power BI as well, where you could see by clicking, dragging, dropping, you don't need to be a developer to work with a lot of the data sets and build those dashboards. The perceptual intelligence talked a bit about the bots as well as the cognitive services. Those, again, being more of a framework or an enablement. There are a lot of vendors out there starting to take those, such as ourselves, and build those into end solutions that can meet niche needs. But that's the point there. Having those tools and ability to take that further is huge. Fast and flexible, so that's really what the cloud brings. Pre-configured solutions brings as well. So you don't need to stand up a rack of servers and try to build your own ecosystem to handle all your different types of data. So you can leverage Hadoop and still leverage that within the Microsoft ecosystem and build a robust end-to-end solution. Secure and scalable as well. So I talked about, for example, in a data warehouse, so that's flexible, and as you consume more, it will elastic, if you will, be elastic and build itself out, as well as their security and compliance measures being layered into a lot of the Cortana Intelligence Suite. And then tried and tested, so that gets into Microsoft's running it. A lot of its end solutions. Bing is one of the world's largest search engines, and clearly that's also giving you a lot of predictions as you do your search. So it's already leveraging a lot of its own dog food, so to speak, there, as well as in its Xbox platform, which I have kids. I'm not a huge video gamer, but I see a lot of the interaction that they have it in the new generation. With that being the leading platform there, they leverage a lot of that same predictive intelligence and machine learning and a lot of what it does. And I don't know if it's making our children any smarter, but it's certainly helping them get through things and move through their life a lot faster than it did for a lot of us back in the day. So clearly something that we get excited about, and we'd like everyone else to be equally excited as to what the Cortana Intelligence Suite can bring to the table for everybody. So next steps, where do we go from here? Mentioned a bit about how we're starting to work and build some of our own line of business solutions based upon the ecosystem. We also do our own assessment for organizations that are really struggling with where to begin. Perhaps you own some of this, perhaps you don't, perhaps you're just interested in it. So really trying to do a bit of a fit gap in terms of these solutions, the possibilities, what you own, what you are interested in, and help roadmap that out for you and do that assessment so that you can start taking advantage of this in a very productive and efficient way. Proof of concept, so perhaps there's a niche need and you see or hear about a tool or a technique that you feel really would relate to your business, and perhaps that's something you've been wondering how to take to the next step as well. And that's another area where we have begun to work with various organizations on maybe using one or two of different tools and applying that to some specific use cases that would fit their industry or perhaps a horizontal process within a certain department within the organization. Also, the Microsoft website is deeper with information on this suite than what I have found on a lot of their other tools in the past. I mean, there's typically a lot of, you can go to Tech Web and you can get into a lot of deep information there, so I'm not shortchanging what they've put out there in the past on that information. But to me, from a more of an end consumer, not having to be a complete propeller head, there's a lot of good documentation, training, free trial information that I'd say an average user who might be a little bit sometimes gun shy for trying to get in and read or utilize that information can quickly access that information and begin to use it. And that's the URL for those that are perhaps either taking screenshots or watching this on recording. And then also next steps, we are putting together some future webinars where we can get more straight just demos, getting into the different pieces, as I mentioned, some of the proof of concepts, but getting in and using some of the items such as the Cortana Personal Digital Assistant and asking those questions and watching how it can render information through Power BI as an example. So look for some invites to the next wave of webinars that we'll be putting on. So from there, I'm going to turn it back over to Elizabeth, who will help us wrap up today with our Q&A.
All right, thanks, John. And as a reminder, you're welcome to enter your questions in the right-hand navigation chat panel. In the interest of the time, if we can't get to your question, we will follow up with you directly. And for the, let's see, for the 10 of you that requested a follow-up call at the information@emtecinc.com email, we'll be sure to have someone follow up with you later on. And then as well as Joe, Tim, Larry, and Jill, I did get your request to receive the invite for the Deeper Diver Dive webinar when we have the details set up. The questions that I'm receiving so far, John, this one goes to you. So they're interested in learning, how do you recommend that we get started on Power BI?
Good question. Mentioned on the last slide that there's a wealth of information, so definitely go to the website. You can Bing or Google Power BI. It should come up to with the main URL, which is powerbi.microsoft.com. And on there you can get there's a free version that you can access and download there. And there's some guided learning, some good, some not so good, depending on how deep you really want to go with it. But there's a lot of short videos that are informative and will get you started on it. What we found that some of them are not as deep as you'd like, and that's where perhaps you may need to reach out to Emtec to take you further down the path, but certainly that's a good way to start. And if you need some hand-holding initially down that path, certainly reach out. We'd be happy to help.
Okay, thank you. The other question that came in is the Cortana Voice feature ready for prime time yet?
It is. It needs to be on a Windows 10 machine. And there's certain packs you download and settings you turn on. But essentially, once you have that available, you are able to, like you would on a phone with Siri, Google Now, or the Cortana on the phone, ask those questions. And what it will do is it will integrate with Power BI. At least this is the out-of-box capabilities. You can still do some of the cognitive services and bots or things of that nature to build it out further. But what that will allow you to do is to ask those questions. So where I had typed in trade show, for example, you can ask, show me trade show customers, right, or prospects from trade shows, and it'll give you that result set just based upon your own natural language question. So that's something that is available, and as Elizabeth had mentioned in our deeper dive demo, if that's such a thing. I guess maybe we're coining that as an Emtec thing, but the deeper dive demo, as we're going to set up in our future webinar, we will be showing that.
Okay, great. And let me see. The other question came in, and he apologizes. He had to join late. He's kind of curious to know, you may have covered it, but the difference between Microsoft Data Lake and Hadoop?
Sure. It's not so much a difference in that the Azure Data Lake store that Microsoft has produced, it works within that ecosystem. So it is an Apache Hadoop file system itself, right? So it's compatible with the Hadoop distributed file system, or HDFS, for those that are really more versed in the whole Hadoop world. But it works within it, and it'll work with Hadoop projects like Apache Spark, Storm, and some of the other aspects of Hadoop.
Okay. We'll give you guys all just another minute to submit your questions, and in the interest of your time, we want to make sure that we have you off just before the 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock hour. Give it just a couple more seconds. And as a reminder, we will be sending out the slides and the recording to you. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to kind of talk about your own, use case scenarios, just feel free to follow up with us at the email I sent out earlier, which is information@emtecinc.com. And that looks like that's all the questions we have. So this does conclude our webinar for today. Again, we really appreciate the time that you took to share your morning, or your lunch rather, with us, and we look forward to following up with you in the future. Thank you very much.